Welcome, everyone. I know there's still people joining us. We are just going live on YouTube. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Today, we've got our interesting webinar called Are Fuels the Fuel Solution to Decarbonization? We know in the maritime sector, we've been talking for a long time about what we should do to try to pollute as less as possible. And there are several options that are still on the table nowadays. So we've got ABS, a classification society. We've got Baleària, who's a ship owner. And we've got two SMIs that have different solutions to this. We're going to start with ABS, with Rene Laursen, who's the director of the Global Sustainability Center at Copehangen, and Eduardo Alvarez, who's the senior principal surveyor in charge from ABS Europe, is going to introduce him.
Okay, good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you, Belén, and Bolt for the invitation and arranging this seminar. We as a class society have different places where we deal with sustainability, and in Europe we have Rene Laursen, which will be the speaker today, as director of Global Sustainability in Copenhagen, Denmark. He has been involved with decarbonization and fuels very deeply. He's in our technical expertise. And recently, he has participated in the team together with EMSA, preparing the technical documents, especially now published on biofuels and on ammonia as fuel. So just Rene, you can start presenting yourself and doing the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this introduction, Eduardo. I will see if I can share this presentation just a moment. Oh. Can you see it now? Is it up?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yeah, then as Eduardo he mentioned, then I'm working for ABS in the sustainability group, and I've been doing that for a little more than 3 years. I have a background from MAN, where I have been working with two-stroke engine and been responsible for developing the first gas engine operating on natural gas called the MEGI engine, and introducing also the first methanol fueled engine and the first ethane gas fueled engines and the first LPG fueled engine later on in my career at MAN. But now I'm focusing on all the new fuels that is coming around, and spending all my time basically on this. We are also looking in new ships to see how can we optimize those ships in order to limit the CO2 emission by introducing new technologies such like carbon capture system, waste heat recovery system, air lubrication system, and the wind assisted propulsions. So all this we are looking at in the sustainability group. Today the question is whether new fuels is the full answer to decarbonization, or does it need any help actually to be introduced? And I will explain a little bit about those a couple of projects where I've been participating. And I think actually when you listen to this story, you will actually conclude by yourself at the end whether fuel is sufficient. We have the first picture here shows the first container ship, which is going to be fueled by methanol, and this container ship was recently launched at HMD in Korea, Hyundai Mipo shipyard, and now it's shown that it can float. It will complete testing and it will arrive to Copenhagen in September this year, and on the first journey it will operate on green methanol. So that will set a complete new standard for the use of these fuels in shipping. This ship is going to be the first ship which is operating carbon neutral, and this has sent a strong signal to all the competitors of Maersk to go in the same way. And we see now that more than 50 engines, large bore engine, has been ordered for using green methanol, and basically all the major liner operators is part of this. OOCL, COSCO Shipping, CMA, CGM, MSC, Hapag-Lloyd is also moving in this direction. So basically we see them all into this. Using new fuel will have a cost impact on the operation, and that is the big challenge. I've been participating in this project here. It's called My Fuel Project. It's a cooperation of companies, Danish Technical University, Maersk, DFGS, and a design institute in Copenhagen joined together in order to find out what are the costs for those new fuels in the future. And here we have been looking at production of gray methanol compared to all the new methanol which is coming out. Bio methanol, where you're using renewable electricity for production of the methanol, and also methanol where the carbon comes from a point source, meaning that it's a carbon capture system which is applied on a power plant somewhere that collect carbon from renewable fuel source. And then we have looked also at using direct air capture to collect carbon directly from the air and use that in the synthesis process for production of methanol based on renewable fuel. So these fuels was the main goal for doing this estimation. Furthermore, we looked also at ammonia. How is it being produced today? We looked at the blue ammonia, where you're producing ammonia is being done today, but you add carbon capture system on top of it to collect the CO2 and inject that back to the soil. And then we looked at ammonia produced in a green manner, where all the energy comes from renewable energy for production of ammonia. When we're looking at methanol, then the big question is, when we're looking at the cost, the question is, where does the biomass or the carbon comes from? And that has a huge impact on the end cost of the fuel. And there's a lot of uncertainty in how much biomass which is actually available in the future. So it was decided to look at 3 different scenarios. One with high availability of biomass, medium and low availability of biomass. But I think throughout the project it was concluded that we are in a scenario where we're looking at the low availability of biomass, meaning that this biomass, the cost for this is probably going to spike in the future. Production of renewable energy was placed 4 different locations in order to investigate how does that impact the fuel cost. Sizing of renewable plan for production of these new is very critical when it comes to renewable energy and the cost for the renewable energy. So therefore, there was some criteria that has to be in place in order to find a cheap and good location for production of renewable energy. The ideal place will comprises all those parts here, meaning that you will have high wind resources, you will have high solar resources, you have access to a port, and you have access to fresh water, and you have a large area of land that do not cost anything, because you need, in order to put up energy, sufficient energy for production of those fuels, you need quite big areas of land. So it's important that these land areas is fairly cheap. And then it was identified the 4 location in Chile, have a big area with desert close to the sea, where all these facilities were in place, and also in southern Australia and in Western Africa. And we also found the wind map and also the solar map for those areas there, and we use those for establish an optimized design for renewable production. When you have renewable energy, you need also to electrolyze it in order to turn it into hydrogen, and this hydrogen can be used as a building block for basically all types of fuel that is being considered for shipping, both methanol, methane, hydrogen, and ammonia. And we see also that it can be incorporated into the Fischer-Tropsch process, and here you can also use this hydrogen to build a diesel oil molecule that can go in and replace diesel oil directly without any impact on engines and ship design. The big question is which fuel is the most efficient to produce for the future. I'll go directly to the result here from this study, and in this case we are looking at the medium amount of biomass, and what you can see is that we have all the fossil fuels. The prices is located here in the bottom, and then we have the renewable fuels, methanol and ammonia, and they have a tendency to reduce in price when production is scaling up, and they are fairly depending on the cost for electricity. And the bigger scale of production of electricity, the lower price of the fuel you will get. We have also 2 here, and this is the diesel-like fuel and the biomethane. Those prices is rising, and even though that the production is being scaled up, the reason for that is that those type of fuel can be used in a lot of industries already, so they can go in and replace the fossil fuels we have today. So there's already a big demand for this. So the expectation is that those fuels they will rise in value over time. And you can see here by 2050, it is estimated that these fuels will be 2 to 3 times higher than it will be for ammonia and methanol type of fuel. But over the full period, there's no chance that these new fuels will actually reach the same level as the fossil fuel. Even in 2050, there is still a factor of 2. I know the fluctuation of fossil fuel is happening over time. You can have crises, you can have short period where you have high spikes of the prices. But the general condition is that there will be a big deviation. This fuel cannot compete by itself. It needs subsidies. And it was found that subsidies of a minimum 200 euro per ton of CO2 is needed in order to make those competitive. If you're looking at energy, I mean fuel to fuel competitiveness. Up to 350 is needed. The question is, will that be a taxation that can be applied in the future? I don't know. It's a big question. One thing is the fuel cost. Another thing is if you're having a ship which is operating on these new fuel, you will also need to do modification on the ship, and that has a cost impact also. So we looked at container ships, we looked at bulk carrier, we looked at different ship types to see what is the impact of installing this equipment. And then we make a total cost of ownership model for the ships to see what is the impact here. And here we have the fossil fuels in the bottom. These are the straight line, and then we have biomethane, and we have ammonia and methanol go in this direction as we saw before. But it's still seen that there is a big deviation, even though that we apply a taxation here of 25 euro per ton of CO2, that there is actually a big gap here between the fossil fuels and the cost for operating those ships. We need a taxation of around 300 euros per ton before these new fuel will be competitive. And this is simply because that there is added cost on the ship to consider as well as the fuel cost. We had an input also from another university in Denmark, and this was about the available biomass, and he criticized the project for overestimating the amount of biomass. And he has done some analysis on looking at all the sectors in the market that is needed biofuels or biomass in the future, and concluded that there's far from enough biocarbon for all sectors. There will be a huge requirement for getting carbon from direct air capture. So he believed very much in this, and that's actually concluded in that that ammonia is probably going to be the cheapest option of them all. Here we have plotted all the different fuels, and the conclusion was that it's probably the low availability of biomass. So it's probably this part here which is going to count. And you can see the green colored line here. This is the ammonia, where ammonia is the most competitive and solution, and the blue here is blue ammonia. So you see, it's if you plot them in here, then it's found that ammonia is probably going to be the cheapest option of them all. It's fairly easy to scale up this production, and it's basically only depending on the electricity cost. So the more the production can be scaled up, the cheaper the fuel can become, and more competitive the fuel can become. Another indication here, this is from Ørsted. They have made an estimate on how much biomass and biocarbon there could be from carbon capture system in the future. They believe very much in electrification, and believe that this is ramping up because it's the cheapest way to produce electricity. It's cheaper than using fossil fuel to produce electricity from wind power and solar power. So we will not see any new power plant coming up using fossil fuel and renewable fuels. So they expect that this will decline over time, and the amount of biocarbon will be less and less over time. You can see here the amount of biocarbon represented by the green area is getting smaller and smaller over time. Also indicating that the biomass will be a limited source for the future. Another project also mentioned by Eduardo that we are participating in is making reports about the use of new fuels in shipping. And we have so far completed one report about the ammonia and one about biofuel. And those reports is available if you go to the IMSA site under publication, and then those reports can be downloaded. And these are quite heavy reports. It's 300 to 400 pages with information about the use of ammonia in shipping. What is covered in those reports is listed here on the left side. It's the availability of the fuel, the sustainability on when it's been produced, the suitability where we're looking at engine and fuel cells technologies available in the market and how they can adapt those new fuels. And then we look at the total cost of ownership for different ship types. We have also a section about the regulation and what is needed in the regulation to be changed in order to adapt those new type of fuel. And finally, we conclude on a risk assessment done for different ship types. And this is done both for ammonia and for the biofuel. The next things we are working on is a report about hydrogen that will come out here in August, September. And we have also one about a wind-assisted propulsion system. And that will come out maybe October this year. And then there's 2 other reports under discussion. We're going to do 6 reports in total. It's probably going to be around e-fuel and the production of e-fuels, e-diesel, e-methane, and e-methanol. What are the impact of producing those for the shipping? And then we'll be looking at the waste heat recovery system and air loop system as the energy improvement device that can be applied on ship, either new build or existing. We have also proposed to do a report about carbon capture, but that's really not supported by IMSA at the moment. They don't foresee that this is the right way forward for shipping, so they're not interested in that part. But that sends also a quite clear signal. If you look at the conclusion from the report here, and here we have also been looking at the availability of biomass. Basically, we looked at 11 different types of biofuels, all being produced from biomass. So biomass is actually a critical part of the biofuel. And if there's no biomass available, there's no biofuel in the future. And here is what we concluded on when we looked at the literature and summarizing the expectation for future biomass. Today, the shipping is using approximately 18 exajoule of energy, and that will increase to a little more than 20 in 2050. So there will be an expectation that the amount of required energy for shipping will increase. But as I saw before, there's also other sectors that will compete on getting this. And for instance, there's aviation, and they will probably be willing to pay more for the biomass than shipping is able to do. Shipping is basically operating on waste fuel today by using heavy fuel oil. And all the sectors that we are competing with is basically willing to pay the extra. So the question is there anything left for the shipping? That's a big question mark. What we can see is that the expectation is that if you go to 2050 from 2030, it's not expected that there will be more biomass available actually for the total market. It's not the expectation that there is an increase in this amount. There is today some lignocellulosic biomass available, which is not being used. This can actually improve the availability when those biomass is incorporated in fuel production. There's also potential for developing farms producing algae at sea. So there is a little bit of improvement, but we should not be expecting to get much more from forest and from agriculture. You can see here, this is almost at same level. Forest industry is almost at same level from 2030 to 2050. But a lot of the availability depends on the sustainability requirement. And there's no common sustainability requirement which is covering the world. When we look at methanol, then I have made a reference here to the Methanol Institute, which have a home site, and here they're plotting in all the producers of green methanol. But I will say that this chart here, and it's very well used in shipping. There's many who's using that site, but it is a little bit misleading, because many of those here, these production facilities, they have not started the investment yet. So it's not near clear that we will have this amount of 8 million tons of green methanol in 2027. And also, as you saw before, the cost for this green methanol will be 3 to 4 times the cost of fossil fuel. So even though there is 60 to 80 new container ships which is coming out, able to operate on methanol, there's a little bit of doubt about whether they will actually operate on methanol. It's all dual fuel engines, so they could actually continue operating using fuel oil. All of them have the possibility to use fuel oil today. Price of the coming methanol will have a big impact on whether they will switch to the use of methanol. We also rank the different biofuels in order to see what makes most sense in shipping. And here we see that the methanol also arrived on the top level together with Fischer-Tropsch diesel and biomethane. And we compared it on these different elements here: fuel production, production maturity, greenhouse gas potential, and availability of feedstock and suitability in engines and fuel cells. The report about ammonia concluded that if you look at the announced production amount, then today there's been produced 235 million tons of ammonia. And if you look at the announced production quantities, it's 133 million tons of ammonia, which is expected in 2030. And that is a significant scale up of production. And this is simply the energy sector in Japan, which is driving this uptake of new production facilities. The production methods for producing ammonia is well known. It's the Haber-Bosch process, and that has been optimized over the last 40 years. Electrolyzer is also known, that turning electricity into renewable hydrogen that can be used for production. The unknown here is to scale it up to this quantity which is needed there. Efficiency for producing ammonia is also quite high, up to 72%. And ammonia is a commodity which is well known worldwide. And here you can see the location of all the storage facilities around. the ports, and they're present basically everywhere where shipping is operating, and also in very large quantities. You see quantities of up to 50,000 tons of ammonia. And if you plot the new production facilities here that is being announced, to see where are those placed, and you can see that Australia here is dominating this. They will probably take 1/3 of all the new green ammonia which is produced. And the reason for that is that they're very close to the Japanese market here, which is going to use ammonia, adding that into boiler facilities, and use that to reduce carbon emission from the power plant production. Conclusion from the ammonia report here is that production is well established. It actually is a fine fuel. There's issues with burning ammonia that you can have increased NOx, you can have N2O in the emissions, and that is a greenhouse gas. And then the amount of pile fuel for burning the ammonia is an unknown. But it's well known in shipping. It has been carried in LPG carriers for more than 50 years. So it's easy to transport. The big challenge to overcome is perhaps the toxicity of ammonia. We see, however, that all the new projects with ammonia in shipping, that they are collecting ammonia vapor in case of leakage. So there's a very limited amount of vapor that is actually being sent out. I think I will end with this. I have spent my 20 minutes here. So I don't know if we should take questions now or wait to
we will take them at the discussion panel. Okay. So yes, because that way everyone will have a more overview of everything. Thank you so much, Rene. It was a very, very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Okay.
I will stop sharing then.
Yeah, sure. Now we are going to have another side of the discussion. We will be talking to Pablo García from Baleària, Spain. And the floor is yours. Feel free to present yourself, your company, and tell us your view on where are we headed. Thank you. Pablo?
Yes, sorry, I was mute.
Okay.
Yes, I will use my presentation. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you to the organization for giving me the opportunity to participate in this webinar. And well, I'm Pablo García, new projects director in the fleet area. And I joined Baleària when they started to do the retrofit of the vessels into LNG. So just to go ahead with the decision they did to continue with the commitment of improving our carbon footprint. Well, for those who doesn't know Baleària, I'm going to go fast through our presentation. Okay. Well, Baleària, we have 36. Well, this is not actualized because this year we have received some vessels and fleeted some new ones. So we are about 35. Operating in 24 routes in 6 countries, well, mainly between Spain or mainland and the island in Spain with the Spanish city, the lines with the line in the United States connecting.
Pablo?
Miami with Bahamas. There are some problems. Hello?
Yeah, it looks like you've got a little bit of hitch with your internet connection, but it's solved now. So.
Oh, okay. I'm in the hotel, so
Okay.
maybe it's not so good. Well, Baleària is quite committed with the digitalization and so on to improve efficiency and passengers on board. This is, and also with the environment and social activity. And regarding decarbonization, Baleària has spent a lot of money, has invested a lot natural gas, which is the solution which is actually existing, and is the line which was marked by the European Union in order first to commit with the tier 3 with the nitrogen and sulfur emissions. With natural gas you reductions. So, well, we have invested a lot on this since 2016 that we started our pilot project with an auxiliary engine for electricity generation on board one of our ferries. It was very good experience. So in 2018, we started to retrofit 6 vessels into dual fuel. We ordered 3 new. The 4th one is coming, and last week we received the electric ferry, which will be operating in between the Balearic Islands. It's quite short trip, so in that line, this is feasible to do the electrical propulsion. Also in this ferry, we want to do a pilot test with hydrogen, to install a fuel cell there with compressed hydrogen. But well, this is under study now, and well, we have done the initial study. We are doing the HACID with Bureau Veritas. So well, we are moving. Still is not ready, but we are moving also in that direction. These are the 6 vessels we retrofitted into dual fuel. All of them will start again to sail with natural gas now that the price has come back to a reasonable level. But all of them have been sailing and have been sailing when everything. The price of so have been gas 95% of the time. So they're proceeding quite well, and the result is really good and successful. These are the 4 new buildings. 3 of them are already sailing. The 4th one is a sister ship of Eleanor Roosevelt, with small differences, but mainly in the passenger capacity. These 2 is the Vicentini type standard ferries with a speed of 20 knots, more or less. And the Eleanor Roosevelt is the first fast ferry catamaran with LNG propulsion. And well, the operation of the vessel is really good and is behaving quite good, and so we are now building the 2nd unit in Armón, in the north of Spain, that will be the next year. And this is the Formentera. It's just a 1-hour trip. So the capacity, the power needed is slow. It's not big vessel. It's only 80 meters length. So and the speed is about 12 knots. Maximum is 14, 15 knots, but will operate about 12 knots. So well, this makes the electrical solution possible. Also, Baleària is participating in several European projects, all of them bound for the decarbonization or digitalization for
It seems Pablo is still having trouble with his connection, even with the camera turned off. Okay.
Is okay?
Yes, now we can hear you again. Yes.
Sorry. Well, I was saying that we have been working a lot for a long time in the decarbonization, and it also it was mentioned by Rene that 300 euro per CO2 ton emitted. EU ETS will be 100 euros, and fuel EU will be much more than that. So we have to move into new fuels if these regulations remains as they are today. To achieve this goal, well, it is there are different ways of reducing the CO2 emissions. Of course, with logistics, hydrodynamics, with the machinery. All these are small actions that can be done in the mainly in the logistics, also in the hull design, or some systems that are now being more in operation, which are air lubrication, wind assist, all these kind of things will help. But this will help, I don't know, as it is saying in this slide, could be between 5 to 20% maximum, but 20% is if the vessel is not is all with low efficiency. On the contrary, we are talking about between 5 to 10%. And from now to 2030, with this kind of improvements, okay, you can keep on complying with the targets of fuel CII, and the other you have some limits, and with small improvements in the efficiency of the vessels or in the logistics or systems like wind assist and these kind of things, you can reduce a little bit, and using biofuels, blending with the standard fuels, we can keep on complying, or we can keep on in the targets established with the CII and these new regulations. But from 2030 and on, we need something different. We must enter into the part of into this part of energy. So we need something in the fuels. It can be biofuels, but as Rene mentioned, there will not be enough biomass for having biofuels for everybody, not even for the single marine market. But if we take into account the whole industry, it will not be possible for sure. So we need some new fuels that will allow us to comply and to reduce cost, because on the contrary, we'll be out of the market. Carbon capture is there. Still is quite complicated at one point that the moment is not is not feasible, except with the small combinations that are being seen somewhere, combination with LNG use, and then part of the LNG is being used for producing hydrogen with a reactor, and then in the reactor you can produce, or you capture the CO2 and liquefy it, or you have some solid carbon, which is easier for storing and so on, but still is quite in the development phase or in the study phase. Then, well, as Rene has been showing there, and there are several studies regarding the different fuels. All of them has the strength, weakness. I'm not going to enter in each of them, but I agree that nowadays what is more in the target or in the line is methanol and ammonia. From my part, as we are dealing with passenger vessels, I don't see at the moment the ammonia. But well, this will depend a lot on the systems or the regulations on how the issues are solved, because well, we have some problems with venting lines of the fuel lines or the fuel tanks, or when we are bunkering. There are still a lot of things to be addressed, which mainly is with in the bunkering phase and also in the fueling. Easier will be if it is used for a fuel cell, because after bunkering, all the ammonia will be always in the engine room or whatever it is, or wherever it is. But you don't need to move it around the vessel, and will be easier to control. But at the moment, for passenger vessel, ammonia, I see it difficult to be used. But well, also is and we are also controlling the progress of these fuels. We are checking all of them, and when we are considering future fuels, we have to take into account several points. One of them, which is really important, a part of the price, of course, is the energy density, because this will mean that the more fuel weight, the more fuel space we need, the less we can transport. So the efficiency of the business itself is quite compromised. So it depends on how it is handled. Of course, hydrogen is very green, very nice, but the way of storing on board is really difficult, even with cryogenic, which there are some vessels already using it, but makes it quite complicated, and also the availability of liquid hydrogen is very low at the moment. So we keep on watching all of them and checking all the aspects that impacts into the selection of not only the part of the vessel that is called the tank to wake, but they are including the well to tank. So the complete cycle, the well to wake analysis. This is one example of data obtaining that was made by Bureau Veritas, I saw in a recent Congress. So, well, it seems that the synthetic fuels could be a good solution for all this situation. As we don't have enough biofuels, then we will probably have to move into synthetic. Also, we have to take into account, this is more for the general, not only for the marine, but for the general concept of the decarbonization, because to produce any of the fuels, we will need renewable electricity. But with 1 kilowatt of renewable electricity, with batteries, we will need 1.5 kilowatts of renewable energy to have 1 kilowatt of
Pablo?
power in our vessel. With hydrogen, we are talking about 5. Yes, I'm back.
Yes, okay. Yes, you're back.
Yeah, sorry, the internet connection in the hotel, so it's not so good. But I mean, for any of these fuels, we will need much more electricity from renewables. If you inject directly the electricity into the grid, the process is much more efficient. So the problem will be the availability of renewable electricity. There is sense when there is overload in the grid for the use of renewable electricity. Then we can produce any of these fuels. We can produce green hydrogen for producing all of these fuels, but that probably will not be enough for all the electricity needed. As we can see here, and it's quite similar to what Rene has shown, for any of the synthetic fuels, we will need green electricity and then carbon capture, and then we produce any of the fuels. Well, nitrogen is not with carbon capture, but we will need, in any case, green electricity. Green, or maybe if the blue is admitted, then we can use natural gas, and then the situation will be easier in this sense, that the availability of green or blue electricity for producing these fuels. But we will compete with a lot of industries for these synthetic fuels, so the price will not be so good, and we will have to check which one is the most convenient. This is the problem now, to try to know which will be the easiest to have, the one which will have really availability, and the one which will be available in the area you are operating. In our case, it's easier because we are operating always in the same area, but vessels doing tramp operation, well, it's much more difficult when they have to move from one continent to other, and they have to have the same fuel in all of them, or at least compatible. Again, with the production of green electricity, well, this is the demand for the marine sector of energy. And if we see here the production of green electricity is, at the moment, today, the production of green electricity is not enough for the electricity or the power needed for the marine sector. And we have to take into account that each kilowatt here means 5 kilowatts here. We need 5 times of this. So at the moment, there is no, so the increase of electrical renewable electricity will, we need that rise really a lot. Okay, so, well, these are the regulations that are coming. This is what I was saying, that the fuel, mainly the EU ETS and the fuel EU, are the most pricing for us, the most problem economically for our industry in Europe, of course. But
Pablo, please
yeah.
try to wrap up, because your time is.
Okay, I finished. Okay, this is the impact. Well, the conclusion for us in this moment, we are looking into all the fuels, all the solutions. We know that the technical part will be there. Any of the whichever is the winner, the technical part will be solved. The problem, I think, will be the availability and price. And the line today, the only line I see, if today we have to build a vessel, is to go into dual fuel with LNG, because LNG today is there, even being gray or black or fossil LNG, we are reducing emissions. Okay, here it says 30. We take into account methane slip. We go to 20. I don't know, 15. But we are reducing. If we use methanol, which is not green, we are not reducing at all emissions. And it's quite easy to move into bio LNG, because for the engine there is no problem at all. Logistics is exactly the same. So can be done immediately. We have we have done one trip with bio LNG, and there was no problem at all. And the next step is to move into synthetic LNG, which also means nothing apart of the cost and availability. Of course, as Rene has said, we don't know the price of LNG in the future, because this will be quite demanded, and this could be the problem. But at the moment, if we build the vessel with this configuration, the vessel can survive for the 30 years that we expect the vessel that has to be in operation. So that's it from my part.
Thank you so much, Pablo. Very, very interesting. Now we are going to have a couple of companies, SMIs, that are trying to produce these fuels. So I'm going to present you Johannes Bochdalofsky from South Africa and his company CH4. So Johannes?
Yeah, it's all happening. I just need to sort out the sharing and all of that.
Yes.
All right. Let's see. Yeah, well, yeah. Good morning, all. Very interesting. I'd love to chat more with Rene on the backside of this. Yeah, so CH4's concept is to very much provide that. To provide the biomass to produce sufficient biogas to then get the bio-LNG going at scale. And I can skip through most of this because it's been mentioned one way or another, but in essence, fuel efficiencies aren't sufficient to get us to carbon neutrality, right? Now, our idea is to large-scale farming of ulva, that's a seaweed, along desert shores. So not offshore, but land-based, however, in desert areas, so that there is no impact in terms of competing with food as well as expensive land or other. It also means that you're typically sitting in the areas that have got high solar irradiation input. So if I refer back to the slide with the areas that Rene showed, which are particularly well, all the coastal areas that were part of that are areas where we can go, plus our home base, South Africa, which was missing in the slides shown for wind and solar capacity. Now, that biomass, that algae seaweed, is then just merely converted into biogas and then upgraded into methane and CO2. And in the first step, the CO2 will just be sold off to the food and beverage market, which at least here in Africa is starved for high-grade CO2. And the methane is turned into bio-LNG for bunker fuel. And I get why, I'll get into why that is a particularly scalable thing. And I think Rene can more talk about these things here at much depth and length. But we believe that here is the solution is ready to go in terms of the infrastructure for distribution and consumption are there. It is scalable. It is blended in with the fossil LNG. That means that the first kilogram we produce is useful. It's not in competition with food. Now here it says ammonia is not in competition with food, but considering that ammonia is being used heavily as fertilizer around the world and Africa is experiencing a major fertilizer scarcity, it is in indirect competition with food. Red on the map indicates the areas that we have identified where we can set up. It equates to around 18,000 kilometers of coast where we could scale to. It is all area with very low population density and basically no or low natural habitat value and no farming. As mentioned, we're sitting in Cape Town. We're having we're working with the Freeport of Saldanha, which is about 100 kilometers north of Cape Town. And one of the beauties of that is that we are sitting directly adjacent to the entire Asia to Europe trade that does not go through the Suez Canal. It goes for most of the locations where we can go. We're almost always right next to a port, or we can be right next to a port, and produce locally even for passing traffic. For Africa, that has got the advantage that we can, via virtual fuels or just via the shipping being incorporated into the emissions trade in Europe now and increasingly in Asia, we can leverage emissions trade even if the African countries themselves don't yet have introduced it. Cost viability, because that's been talked about quite a bit. It is compatible with fossil fuels at the moment already, and that is because we're not going the very expensive way that other algae to fuel things are doing, where microalgae is being grown, which is very expensive, and then they're trying to extract the lipids. And on the other hand, though, we're not competing for the feedstock. On the contrary, we can use the digestate that comes out of the biogas plant as fertilizer in our own aqua farm, and thereby have a very circular production, and all process energy demands are satisfied with on-site installed renewable capacity. We don't need to work on the processes to upgrade the, we don't need e-fuels or similar. We just leave it to the bacteria, and then all we're doing is to upgrade the gases with pressure swing absorption. We've looked at what would happen if so once we want to sell the fuels directly, but we've looked at what would be if a vessel operator was to own a plant. So we would develop the plant and operate it for them, but they are the owners. And that particular to talk about the price dynamics and the volatility. And in essence, at the current emission price in Europe, over the lifetime savings, the vessel would be paid back just on the saving of carbon credits, whilst the plant that's needed to produce the fuel would have a simple payback of 10 years or 9.5 years. And thereafter would basically be producing fuel for free in essence for the for the vessel operators. We're looking increasingly at combining our by-produced CO2 with Fischer-Tropsch, then with the green hydrogen that's being produced. Africa and South Africa in particular are increasingly facilitating the growth of the green hydrogen sector. And this would enable us a reasonably cheap synthesis between the two, and would again drive down the cost for e-methanol for the shipping, but also other e-fuels, particularly here in Africa. We're looking at the sustainable aviation fuels, obviously. But we believe that our business case is better off if we were just producing methanol and be offering bio-LNG and methanol in parallel. Now, about the scalability, and we were talking about that, that's come up in both talks previously. An area equivalent to that of Lake Victoria would suffice to get 2/3 of the global shipping fleet's fuel demand satisfied. And that would be at the cost of 3 months worth of subsidies into fossil fuels at the current rate. That would be the entire capex. So it is very much scalable. And whilst Lake Victoria is big, you saw earlier where we can scale to. And it's just desert that we want to scale to. So the space is there. Yeah, and you see it's much more efficient than other biogas feedstocks, and is energy positive, unlike e-fuels. Yeah, let's leave it there. We've recently been included in the IMO's Green Voyage 2050 as the national pilot program for South Africa for the decarbonization of shipping, and also had a whole lot of other programs that we've completed over the last 2 years. And now we are looking at, setting up a test farm. I think I'll still get to what that will look like. But in essence, if we're getting the test farm running this year, we are aiming to have 2 plants in full-scale production before the end of decade. And that would be 30,000 tons of fuel, which is not a major number in shipping, but the scalability is largely limited by available capex. So it can grow much faster too. Yeah, here's a bit on the test farm. It is just a 500 square meter test farm, which is mostly the farming of the seaweed and the recycling of the feedstock from the biogas. South Africa as such already produces 10 to 20,000 tons of that particular seaweed that we do want to produce. So it's an established industry here. We don't need to still research on that. Biogas as such is well resourced, researched and in use, and the same obviously goes for gas upgrading and the use of LNG. So for us, it's really now to prove how well all 3 technologies gel together, and that is us.
Thank you so much, Johannes. That was very interesting. And now we're going to have a Spanish company, ATV, and Fabián Plaza is going to tell us what he does with ammonia and hydrogen. So. I don't know if you're speaking, Fabián. You're muted.
Yes, you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for your invitation. I try to take a short time in the presentation. We are a SME company in Spain with a tradition in ceramic and electroceramic in some application, mainly in space application at the first, with one European project that we lead 3 years ago. And after this experience in special materials, in the case of use on non-thermal plasma applications, we start the last year 2 important projects, a national project, in order to translate this kind of materials and technology in the case of ammonia, not only in the cracking process, but even in the synthesis. So Hydran project is a complete ammonia chain implementation from ammonia synthesis. It's not Haber-Bosch processes because we have to downsizing the synthesis plant in order to get liter production from 100 kilograms per day to 1 ton per day or 5 tons per day. But the most important thing is to match into the nature of the renewable energy, that is intermittent operation, not continuous operation like Haber-Bosch. That implies catalyst reactor, catalyst, new catalyst generation reactor, and store and logistics of the ammonia, and of course cracking on board for pure H2 hydrogen extraction in order to use in conventional fuel cell like PEM, or even direct ammonia solid oxide fuel cell, that is high temperature fuel cell that has a higher efficiency, and is possible to use not only ammonia but even natural gas or methanol or something like that. And the other is for using the ammonia and hydrogen in the case of UEA vehicles with a new vertical and trade-off landing concept with a plane plus drone philosophy in this case, and use the same is hydrogen in conventional fuel cell or ammonia in the case of high temperature solid oxide fuel cells. Okay, I think everybody knows about the advantage of ammonia. The main advantage is the density of energy in terms of hydrogen. That is well known, and is the first molecular packer no carbon-free of hydrogen. Okay. Okay, the cracking we plan to implement by improve in two directions that we will see. Catalyst is a new generation of catalyst, and to avoid the thermal losses or reduce thermal losses that at the limit, I think. How can get this? Catalyst, the traditional concept of catalyst, not even new materials, but the concept is as passive or based only in temperature reaction. But we plan to use not only thermal and new materials in catalyst, but even pulse bias control in the material in order to guarantee a better reaction in this case with the gas, in order to get the dissociation. This is the origin of this concept is the non-plasma use of ammonia that we planned 2 years ago and was presented the last year in MIT and in the International Electric Propulsion Conference in US. You can see the real cases of use of ammonia fuel in the case of electric propulsion and neutralizer. And the same concept is translated not direct non-thermal plasma use, but biased catalyst, in this case, combining temperature and bias or electric power in a little reactor that you can see, combined with a new concept of very low thermal losses. That is the main or the first losses in the cracking process. Is using a very low emission materials in the hot nucleus and combined with high reflectance materials around the nucleus in order to avoid all the thermal losses. Okay. Then we have to extract the hydrogen in the mix of nitrogen and hydrogen, and we are developing a concept, a new concept that is in the first state of the development in the world, that is not to use traditional mechanical pumping or compressor, but we call a T-proton membrane. That is the concept in order to separate hydrogen using a high conductive proton membrane. And at this case, we have a very, very pure hydrogen, and not only this feature, but even we have very good cracking step of the reaction in order to get more hydrogen, because we are extracting at the same time hydrogen from the reactor. And therefore, the system acts in two directions: improve the cracking process, and then getting a very pure hydrogen just for use in PEM or traditional PEM fuel cells, because the membrane in PEM fuel cells, like Nafion, is poisoned with ammonia, and is not possible to use. Even a little content of ammonia, 1 or 10 parts per million, is enough to ruin the fuel cells. Okay, this is the complete schema that we plan to use the cracker, not only for a complete cracking of the ammonia, but even to control the rate of the dissociation from 10% or 15% that is typical in the use of direct fuel system in the propulsion that is update for use of ammonia directly. In the case of the use of hydrogen plus nitrogen, is possible to capture all ammonia not reacting, not dissociated, with some capture system in order to guarantee that is not ammonia in the output. But the complete closed of and security system is to avoid all the ammonia that is not reacting and getting only hydrogen for burning in motor, or for use in PEM fuel cell or soft C cells. That is the new generation of electric generation from hydrogen or ammonia with the higher efficiency. In this case, I understand, Pablo, that the concern about the passengers getting close ammonia burning, but it's not easy to sleep with this potential danger. But in complete closed systems, like a refrigerator, you have refrigerator with ammonia, and there is no problem. Probably in the future, all people, every people can sleep without headaches or headache.
Please, Fabián, wrap up because your time is off.
Oh,
so.
Okay. The last slide is the final numbers that is our projections and targets or technical targets. You can see the more important thing is to keep the process efficient up to or more than 70%. 70% of the energy in terms of hydrogen in the input that you can get in the output. Of course, the quantity of the hydrogen in the output depend on the purity and the warranty of this purity that in this case the efficiency can fall to 50%. But you can avoid or pumping or compressor or manage the final hydrogen extracting from the ammonia. In the case of the release of a system, we plan from 24, you are seeing in the table, and the final probably we will get in 40 in 25 because it's in high power. Probably next year less than 2 kilowatts power with high purity hydrogen because it's a target of the hydrogen project. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you so much, Fabián. Now we are moving to the discussion panel. I'm sorry we are a bit late on time, but yes, I'm going to invite our speakers to the table, and feel free to ask questions on the chat. And yeah, we'll at least have 10 minutes, so we can talk a bit. And we've got a question. So considering the multiple options of alternative fuels, only the larger ports will have enough bunkering capability to cover all of them. How can medium and smaller ports cope with alternative fuel availability? Will ships be required to maintain dual fuel capabilities or other solutions like carbon capture to cover other routes between the main ones? So I don't know, Rene, Johannes, feel free to answer. What do you think?
It's a very, very good, relevant question. So that's, I think when we're looking at the new fuels here, at least when in the startup phase, it will be new for everybody, including also the ports. And what we see is that when people is investigating in those new type of fuels like ammonia and methanol, they will also have to secure that they can get bunkering at the location where they are operating. So that will be mandatory for all ship owners when they are going into a new project. They have also, besides taking all decision around designing the ship, then also need to discuss fuel supply, delivery, and securing that they can get the bunker where they operate. For each port, there will be a necessity to do a risk assessment using those new type of fuel. And at an early stage, it's also recommended to include also the port authorities where they're going to operate, and so they can participate in evaluating the use of those new fuel. Ammonia is especially difficult because of the toxicity. And here the port authorities, they are quite concerned about the use of ammonia. So what we foresee is that ammonia is being bunkered, at least in the beginning, at bunker barge outside the port, at a dedicated location. It will simply be easier to get acceptance for this type of bunkering. So I think for ammonia, we are in the startup phase, unless it's the very big ports like Valencia and Rotterdam, and Algeciras perhaps also, Singapore, then we will see that the bunker parts will be supplied in the areas. But it has to be negotiated with the fuel supplier.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rene.
I would add something.
Just a minute, Pablo, because Johannes had his hand up. So
sorry.
Let Johannes speak first, and then you can go ahead. Johannes, please.
Yeah, I wanted to add, like, just now hear from the more African perspective and discussing these things in Africa, where ports here are generally underperforming as trade hubs. And it's basically been identified that the mere fact that you would have the fuel available will draw in ships additionally. So there is pressure on to the ports to have the fuel available. And the other component goes more into the carbon capture part. One of the beauties of our system is, and we're looking into this on the far end of our development pipeline, but for instance, those CO2 pebble storage systems and similars, they could in essence be discharged in our system. So the aqua farm could reabsorb the CO2 and basically empty the CO2 that had been captured on board of the vessel. Yeah, that's all I had to.
Pablo, I'm sure that you as a ship owner are worried about what fuels you're going to have available. So
yes. Really, we have the experience with LNG. Since 2016, we are using LNG, and still we don't have real port infrastructure in any port. This means that we are bunkering truck to ship. The only thing we need is close installations of storing the fuel. But in the port itself, of course, as Rene has mentioned, we have done HACCP reports, and in every port, it is not valid from one port to other. Even we have to do HACCP studies when we change the vessel or when we change from one pier to other. Always the situation is different. But the port itself, depending if the fuel can be bunkered by truck, doesn't need so big infrastructure, because we are working in several ports without any infrastructure in the port. The only thing you need is that the truck can come from the fuel storage to the vessel. That is the main port. Of course, for the amount of fuel we need, we can handle with this. Big container vessel, cruise vessel cannot do like this because they need a barge. Now in Barcelona, there is a barge, especially for the cruise vessels.
Thank you. Feel free to add more questions on the chat. What are the current technological advancements and infrastructure requirements needed to support the adoption of alternative fuels in the shipping sector, such as hydrogen or ammonia? What do you think it's needed? Johannes, yes. But unmute yourself. Yeah.
It wasn't that. I was clicking the wrong stuff. I was actually more going to ask another question, and that's towards Pablo, I guess, in particular, but maybe Rene too. One thing we haven't discussed, which we are looking at increasingly for short-range vessels like the ferries, but also tugs, cruise suppliers, is simply compressed gas, because it's still got higher energy density than hydrogen, and obviously the infrastructure to support that becomes a whole lot easier. So I think it's a discussion that's missing. I mean, obviously it's the small vessels only, but of those we're also having plenty, right?
Yes, I think this idea with I think it's called CNG gas has been around for some years, but it has never managed to pick up. And I think the reason for that is that it's going to be quite expensive storage facilities that you need to install, and you have quite many connections where there's a potential leak. So maintaining it leak-free is a challenge in itself. And so I think one of those reasons is the background for not succeeding so well in that with that technology. And I think for the bigger ship, you're right. This simply does not make sense because you will carry more container capacity than you will carry cargo in the end on the big ship. So it's might be suitable for smaller ships, as you say, but for some reason we have not really seen it's picking up. I cannot explain you why, but leaks is potentially one critical issues.
So on the leaks, I don't know, I'm not sitting on that end, but obviously CNG is being used in the automotive sector, right? And the beauty of the compressed is that once it's in the cylinder, as long as your valves are maintained, it shouldn't be an issue with the leaking, and certainly less than LNG would be my initial thought.
I would say that if you have it's the same with a barbecue. If you have a bottle with gas, you cannot empty it fully, and that will be the same case on a ship. So you have a waste there, 10%, 15%, 20%, depending on supply condition for your device, engine device or fuel cell, whatever. So that is increased fuel cost.
I would like to, yeah, I'm sorry. No, go ahead. I thought you had finished.
Yeah, it's fine. And anybody else is welcome to chip in. Yeah.
No, I was just going to ask another question. I was going to ask Fabián if he could put Pablo's mind that is a bit more about the use of ammonia, and if you know, what do you think about the use of ammonia on passenger ships? That it's the case of Pablo.
Yeah,
so.
I think it will not be passenger ship where this is going to start. That's it's clear. I think in the IMSA report we concluded that the best suitable ships for using ammonia is of course LPG carrier, where they are carrying ammonia already. But secondly, it comes down to the ships which is very simple, like bulk carriers and tankers. And there's not a lot of crew who has to be educated there. So I think this is where we're going to see the ammonia being used first. It will be in bulk carriers and tankers, and probably tankers, because it's a little easier for them to arrange bunkering facilities for ammonia, because they're traveling typically between ports. Very few ports where a bunker is moving around worldwide. It's more difficult to arrange bunkering of ammonia. So I think perhaps tankers is probably going to be the first one where we're going to see ammonia. We are also seeing that car carriers is traditionally very focused on using clean fuel. And there's many projects with car carriers using ammonia. So this is also a ship type where we could see this introduced. I would say I mentioned a couple of things about ammonia and combustion of ammonia, and there is the risk for getting a quite high amount of NOx in the emissions from burning ammonia, because ammonia in its molecule is containing nitrogen. But the test result we recently have seen from WinGD, which have performed the first test, actually concludes that the NOx is almost not present when burning ammonia. There's a reduction of 60 to 7% NOx compared to fuel oil. And that's almost eliminate the need for having any additional abatement system to remove NOx. Laughter gas was also seen as a solved issue. There's no laughter gas in. So all the issues around combustion, it seems to vanish now. So what we have left is the toxicity issue to deal with this, and that is especially around the bunkering, where you can have leaks, and you have a cloud of ammonia developing in case of leak, and then of course. If you have grounding and collisions, these incidents happens from time to time, and so you will have ammonia spill. But if you compare it, let's say, to a ship carrying fuel oil, then you have a collision and you have a spill of heavy fuel oil, then you will have an impact on this marine environment for 30, sometimes up to 50 years in the area. But for ammonia and also methanol, in a few days, it's vanished from the area. For ammonia, everything will die, but after some days, it will be diluted, and then it disappears, and then the marine environment can start to recover immediately after almost. So it does not have the long-term impact as fuel oil.
Pablo wanted to speak too.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, we are worried about the safety of the passenger, of course, because well, in the hazard you have always the probability and the impact into economics and into human life. Okay, so if the impact in the human life is big, even when the probability is low, then you have an issue there. But I'm sure it will be solved sooner or later if this fuel comes in. But the other problem of ammonia is that at the moment the engines burning ammonia needs a pilot fuel of about 30% with diesel or whichever it is, which means CO2 emissions.
Yeah, but I think if you look, I can send you this result afterwards. But WinGD have verified that they can burn ammonia just with 5% pilot fuel, and they have done tests down to with 2% pilot fuel and still having a stable combustion. So it seems that it's not the big issue actually to ignite ammonia.
Good to know.
Yeah.
I think we are going to send, because I've been getting requests of your presentations. Yes. So I think we will send the presentations, and we will send several links so people can check further information, since we have to wrap up here the webinar. I'm very sorry, because this discussion was being very interesting. So I just a very short thing from each of you I would like to hear. So who wants to start? Rene, you've got the mic open, so go ahead.
You mean a conclusion, or?
Yeah, conclusion, final remarks, because we had to stop. So.
Yeah, well, I can try to finish the reply on the question raised in the beginning. and fuel will not definitely not do it all. You will need more in addition to fuel. You need a taxation system, or perhaps a ban of fossil fuel. Otherwise, we will not see those fuels because they cannot compete on its own. You will see that in order to make those fuel viable, it will need additional means in combination with the fuels in order, simply because that the fuel is 2-3 times more expensive than fossil fuel, and then suddenly technologies like wind-assisted propulsion, air lubrication system, waste heat recovery system, PTO system, all those the energy improving devices, they suddenly become attractive. So we will see these new fuels be combined with all of the technologies we have been talking about over the last 20 years. So that's conclusion from my side.
Thank you. Who wants to go next?
Okay, I can go. From my part, in Europe, the taxation is there. I can assure the cost of the new regulations will allow any other fuel to come in. So we have to move into another fuel. Of course, we must look into fuel efficiency, always improve, like all the systems and Rene has mentioned, lubrication, wind assist, all this must be taken into account. But we need a fuel, and what we need is a clear direction of availability and price of the fuels. So in order to be able to decide for future vessel, not future, the vessel I have to build tomorrow must be useful for 30 years. So tomorrow I have to start one vessel, I have to decide where to go. So what we need is this. I know at the moment it's not possible, but it's what we need.
Johannes, go ahead.
Yeah, but I think the one thing that's been clear is that it's going to be multi-fuel, right? No matter which way we go, we'll need all the fuels and all the additional means to save them. And then probably the one thing I can add is, and I got to that a little bit, we are currently raising, and it's difficult to develop this technology, whichever it is, out of your own pocket. And we're talking, for instance, with the IMO about funding mechanisms where these taxes don't even come in as subsidies, but they can even be reused as development funds, kind of. Yeah, so just on that side, there's a big component to get this pipeline going as well, right?
And I would like to ask Fabián, would it be possible to produce your own renewable fuel using ammonia without the Haber-Bosch process? For instance, a ship owner could have their own ammonia production facility that produces green ammonia, and then utilize a cracking process on board their vessels to convert the ammonia into hydrogen, for example.
I think I agree with Johannes that we will have multi-fuel and multi-technology in processing. Technology or fuel, ammonia or methanol has to pass the competitive barrier first, and second one, all the concerns about the use. I hope the technology can help to get this target. In the case of ammonia, in the downsizing process of the plants, is very good because allows multiple vendors to produce in a small installation. And then I think it's like 20 or 30 years ago with the mainframes and the PCs. The mainframes is not the only solution in order to information process, but the PCs are the key in this case. I think in the energy, probably we will have downsizing process, downsizing in plants, in use, multi-fuel, multi-technology, that can allow in a special application, special technologies or fuels for each case. For instance, small boats can be full electrified using fuel cell is easy, and use onboard ammonia or directly hydrogen in some cases. For instance, in short distance, but in long distance is necessary to carry on ammonia in the boat. But I think it's the sum of all multiple technologies and multiple fuels is the future for each application, cases, or everyone.
Thank you. I would like to thank our speakers. Pablo's connection seems to have dropped off, so I'm sorry I cannot thank him, but I'll thank Johannes, Fabián, and Rene for being here, and everyone who's been participating on the webinar. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll send the presentations as soon as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye. Thank you so much.